The Dravathian delegation crowded the observation deck, their eyes or the equivalents locked on the scene unfolding in the holding bay below. Towering warriors of their kind, adorned in ceremonial plates and bristling with spiked ridges, exchanged wary glances as the tiny human knelt before the creature. The beast in question was a low-slung, fur-covered predator with knife-like claws, pointed ears, and slitted eyes that glinted with an ancient, unyielding malice. It emitted a soft, rhythmic growl as it swished its tail like a coiled whip ready to strike. "How is he still alive?" muttered General Forex, his baritone voice laden with disbelief. "No species has ever managed to tame a Regathian shadow stalker. Not even our finest handlers." The ambassador, a lanky individual named Jaivan, adjusted his gilded sash and shook his head. It appears the human, Eric, possesses some unique technique. But to voluntarily face such a beast without restraints? Madness. On the deck below, Eric sat cross-legged, his demeanor impossibly calm. He extended a hand toward the animal, speaking in tones so low they barely carried through the observation bay's audio relays. The creature sniffed the air, its muscles tense, ready to strike. "He's going to lose his hand," Forex rumbled. Instead, the beast leaned forward and nuzzled Eric's hand, its eyes closing in contentment. The room erupted in hushed murmurs. Jaivan's jaw tightened as he turned to the translator drone hovering nearby. "Explain to me again what the human calls this thing." The drone buzzed, processing the request. It is referred to as a cat ambassador. Specifically, this one's designation is Mittens. General Forex snorted, his spikes bristling. A name as ridiculous as the creature is lethal. Below, Eric scratched behind the beast's ears, eliciting a deep purring sound that vibrated the floor panels. "Are we entirely sure the human understands the gravity of the situation?" Jaivan asked. "Does he know it's dangerous?" The translator beeped, its synthetic voice unwavering. Human Eric has repeatedly asserted that Mittens is just a cat. His demeanor indicates no recognition of danger. The ambassador's mandibles clicked nervously. "That cannot be right. No one tames a Regathian shadow stalker by accident." Eric stood, giving Mittens a final pat on the head before turning to the observation deck. He waved casually. "All good down here. She's warming up to me." The Dravathians recoiled instinctively, some shielding their sensory organs as the cat stretched and flicked its claws. A low hiss escaped the creature, as if it could sense the scrutiny. "Warmth," Forex muttered grimly, "is merely the prelude to annihilation." The misunderstanding had begun 3 cycles earlier, when Eric's research vessel had inadvertently drifted into Dravathian space. Captured and brought aboard their flagship, the Vorhax Dominance, he had been subjected to an exhaustive interrogation about humanity's capabilities and intentions. Eric's apparent lack of concern during the proceedings had baffled the Dravathians. He even laughed at their more ominous threats, citing a cultural misunderstanding every time their patience waned. Then, during a scheduled search of his belongings, Mittens had emerged from Eric's pack. Forex, who had led the inspection, was the first to spot the creature. He immediately activated the ship-wide alarm. "Containment protocols, now. That's a Regathian shadow stalker." Confused but cooperative, Eric had stepped aside as the soldiers swarmed, weapons drawn, only to find Mittens lounging in a patch of artificial sunlight from a nearby energy lamp. "What's all this fuss about?" Eric asked, crossing his arms. "She's harmless. I mean, unless you're a laser pointer." "No human has ever tamed such a beast," Jaivan had declared, his eyes darting between the feline and the human. "You will explain your methods." Eric blinked. Methods? I feed her, scoop her litter box, and occasionally let her nap on my face." "Is that what you mean?" It was this comment that escalated the situation. Dravathian scientists began a frenzy of tests, probing Mittens from a safe distance while Eric was repeatedly questioned about his training regimen. The more he insisted that Mittens was simply a domestic cat, the more the Dravathians became convinced they were witnessing an extraordinary act of interspecies mastery. Over the next few days, the situation grew increasingly absurd. Mittens, now confined to a lavishly outfitted enclosure, was treated with a mix of reverence and terror. Dravathian technicians worked tirelessly to replicate what they assumed was a human mind control apparatus, basing their designs on Eric's decidedly mundane pet care items. Eric, for his part, played along as much as he could. "So you're telling me," he said one day, watching a soldier use tongs to offer Mittens a plate of precisely cubed meat, "you've never encountered a creature like this before?" "Of course not," Jaivon replied, his voice heavy with indignation. "Regathian shadowstalkers are native to only one planet, and even there they dominate the apex predator hierarchy. The fact that your species has domesticated them speaks volumes about humanity's potential as a galactic power." Eric stifled a laugh. "Right. Galactic power. Because of Mittens." Jaivon missed the sarcasm entirely. "Indeed, it explains your species' survival despite your fragile physiology. What other terrors have you tamed?" Eric opened his mouth, then closed it. He considered bringing up raccoons but decided against it. As the days turned to weeks, the Dravathians began to showcase Mittens and, by extension, Eric as a triumph of their cultural exchange initiative. Dignitaries from other systems were invited to witness the human's supposed bond with the deadly beast. Every demonstration played out the same way. Mittens would either lounge indifferently or swat lazily at a feather toy, while Eric offered commentary that sounded profound to alien ears but was, in truth, a series of cat owner platitudes. "She's not being lazy," Eric explained during one such session. "She's conserving energy for a highly efficient ambush. See the tail flick? Classic predator behavior." The crowd gasped as Mittens rolled onto her back, exposing her belly. "Is that an invitation to attack?" someone whispered. Eric shook his head solemnly. "It's a trap. Trust me. You don't want to touch the belly." The attendees nodded, their awe palpable. The turning point came when a rival faction, the Criar, attempted to steal Mittens, believing the Dravathians had unlocked a secret weapon. Their operatives infiltrated the flagship under the cover of a trade delegation, neutralizing the guards outside Mittens' enclosure with precision. But they had not accounted for one crucial variable: Mittens herself. Eric was awoken by the sound of alarms and rushed to the observation deck, where Jaivon stood, stunned, watching the surveillance feed. The Criar intruders were in full retreat, their once imposing armor now scored with claw marks. Mittens sat atop a pile of shredded tactical gear, calmly grooming herself. "What just happened?" Eric asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Your beasts," Jaivon replied, awestruck. "She defended her territory." Eric looked at the screen, then at Jaivon. "Right, her territory. Totally planned that." From that moment on, Mittens' status aboard the Vorhax's dominance was cemented. She was no longer just a pet, she was a guardian, a symbol of humanity's mysterious prowess. Eric, meanwhile, became an unintentional legend, his every mundane interaction with Mittens analyzed for deeper meaning. As the ship prepared to return Eric to his homeworld, Jaivon approached him one last time. "Your secret is safe with us," the ambassador said gravely. "We will not reveal the full extent of humanity's power until the time is right." Eric smiled, scratching Mittens under the chin. "Thanks, Jaivon. That means a lot." As the human departed with his fearsome companion, the Dravathians watched in silence, each one wondering what other unimaginable feats humanity might be hiding. Mittens yawned. The Vorhax's dominance cruised toward neutral space, its usual foreboding aura replaced with a peculiar atmosphere of unease. Though Eric had been granted his own spacious quarters, rumors of his supposed beast-taming prowess spread like wildfire among the crew. Wherever he went, Dravathians stepped aside with a mixture of respect and fear, their spiked armor clinking nervously as they whispered behind him. Mittens, meanwhile, seemed utterly oblivious to her growing reputation. She spent most of her time napping in the warmest spots she could find, her languid movements baffling the crew, who were convinced they concealed predatory precision. Eric had just settled into the common dining area with a tray of alien cuisine, most of which resembled wiggling gelatinous cubes when Jaivon approached, his posture stiff. "Human Eric," Jaivon said, his tone formal, "we must speak." Eric sighed, pushing aside a particularly stubborn cube with his fork. Let me guess, this is about mittens again. Shyvon nodded gravely. The High Conclave has sent word. They wish for us to extend your expertise to a diplomatic mission. Your skills may be pivotal in securing a treaty with the Exelvans. Eric raised an eyebrow. The Zelvans? Aren't they the ones with, he mimed pincers with his hands. Big claws, acid spit, really bad tempers. Precisely, Shyvon replied. Their ruling caste has recently captured a creature resembling your cat. They are struggling to contain it. They have requested assistance from any species capable of handling such beasts, and your reputation precedes you. Eric pinched the bridge of his nose. You're telling me they want me to go wrangle some alien animal because you all think I've got magic cat powers? Shyvon tilted his head. Is that not the case? No, I've been saying this for weeks. Mittens is just a normal cat. Eric's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby crew members. He slumped back in his seat, groaning. But I'm guessing you're not going to take no for an answer, are you? Shyvon's expression softened, almost apologetic. The High Conclave believes you are our best chance. Should we succeed, it could prevent conflict with the Exelvans for generations. Eric stared at his uneaten food, then glanced down at Mittens, who had wandered over to the table and was now batting at the gelatin cubes with disinterest. He sighed again. Fine, I'll do it, but you owe me a lifetime supply of coffee when this is over. Shyvon's mandibles clicked in relief. Your service will not be forgotten, human Eric. The Zelvan capital ship was even more intimidating than the Vorhax's dominance. Its spiked, organic-looking hull glistened in the void, pulsing faintly as though alive. Eric and Mittens were escorted aboard under heavy guard, the Dravathians trailing nervously behind him. A towering Zelvan diplomat met them in the main atrium, its segmented body shifting fluidly as it regarded them with compound eyes. Its pincers clicked in a rhythmic pattern as it spoke, the translator drone interpreting its words. Human beast tamer, the voice intoned. We have restrained the creature in our containment chamber, but its wrath grows with each passing cycle. Your assistance will determine the future of our negotiations. Eric adjusted his jacket awkwardly. Right. Let's go see what we're dealing with. The group was led through a series of winding corridors until they reached a massive, reinforced chamber. Inside, the air hummed with tension. Behind a transparent barrier, a creature paced, a massive six-legged feline with bioluminescent markings and a tail that ended in a cluster of spiked tendrils. It growled low, its glowing eyes fixed on the newcomers. Eric froze. Okay, that's definitely not just a cat. The Zelvan diplomat tilted its head. Does this creature not resemble your own? Only in the has fur and legs sense, Eric muttered. He glanced down at Mittens, who was sitting calmly at his feet, completely uninterested in the monstrosity behind the glass. Mittens cared to weigh in. Mittens yawned. Shyvon leaned in, whispering, perhaps this is a test. They may wish to see your beast exert dominance over theirs. Yeah, that's not going to happen, Eric replied, waving a hand. She barely exerts dominance over the couch. But the Exelvans had already begun deactivating the barrier. Eric's heart leapt into his throat. Whoa, nobody said anything about letting it out. The containment field fizzled, and the alien feline stepped forward, its massive claws clicking against the floor. It growled again, low and menacing, as it sized up Mittens, who was now licking her paw with maddening indifference. The room held its collective breath. The alien creature crouched, ready to pounce when Mittens finally deigned to look up. With a flick of her tail, she released a single, unenthusiastic meow. The effect was instantaneous. The alien feline froze, its growl choking off into a confused whimper. It sniffed the air, then took a cautious step back, its glowing eyes wide. Mittens blinked slowly, the universal feline gesture of disinterest, before turning away entirely. The alien beast dropped to the ground, tucking its legs beneath it in a posture of submission. The Zelvans erupted into a cacophony of clicks and hisses. The translator buzzed frantically. The creature. It recognizes your dominance. Remarkable. Eric gaped. What just happened? Jaivon placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice hushed with awe. Your beast has cowed theirs without violence. Truly, humanity's methods are beyond comprehension. Eric looked down at Mittens, who was now grooming her tail, oblivious to the chaos she had just caused. He couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. Sure, he said finally. Let's go with that. The Zelvans, thoroughly impressed, agreed to the treaty terms within hours. Eric and Mittens were hailed as heroes once again, though the human found himself growing increasingly uneasy with his newfound reputation. Mittens, of course, remained blissfully unaware, content to bask in her growing collection of alien sun lamps. As the Dravathians escorted him back to his ship, Jaivon spoke with uncharacteristic warmth. You continue to amaze us, human Eric. Perhaps one day you will share the full extent of your techniques with our species. Yeah, Eric replied, scratching Mittens behind the ears. Maybe one day. But as they departed, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to get a whole lot weirder. The ship's corridors hummed with activity as Eric and Mittens were escorted back to their quarters aboard the Vorhax Dominance. While Mittens took the entire ordeal in stride, napping in the crook of Eric's arm, the human found himself wrestling with an ever-growing headache. The Dravathian seemed utterly incapable of grasping that his skills were nothing more than the result of owning a profoundly unmotivated domestic cat. By the time they returned to his quarters, Eric had resolved to clarify matters once and for all. As he paced the room, Mittens stretched luxuriously on the bed, batting lazily at a stray piece of fabric. Eric eyed her with exasperation. You know, you could make this easier on me if you didn't look like the poster child for feline laziness, he muttered. Mittens yawned, her tiny pink tongue curling dramatically. Before Eric could press the matter, the door chimed. Jaivon entered, his expression unusually grim. Eric the ambassador began, there has been an incident. Eric groaned. Please tell me it doesn't involve Mittens. Indirectly, Jaivon admitted. A rogue faction of the Crithar has intercepted transmissions regarding your companion. They believe she possesses unparalleled strategic value. They are demanding we surrender both her and you immediately. Eric stared at him. You're telling me there's an entire alien faction willing to go to war over Mittens? Jaivon hesitated. Not war. Yet. However, they have made it clear that if we do not comply, they will pursue alternative measures. Eric sighed, rubbing his temples. What kind of measures? They have launched a stealth vessel to infiltrate this ship and retrieve her by force. Eric froze. You're saying there are alien commandos trying to kidnap my cat? Precisely, Jaivon said, his voice tight with worry. We must act quickly to neutralize the threat. Neutralize, Eric repeated, growing increasingly incredulous. Look, Jaivon, I've been really patient about this whole Mittens the unstoppable predator thing, but this is ridiculous. She's a house cat. She naps for 18 hours a day and gets winded chasing a laser pointer. Jaivon frowned, clearly struggling to reconcile Eric's words with the evidence. Your humility is noted, but the Crithar do not share your modesty. They believe your beast represents an existential threat. Eric opened his mouth to argue, but the ship-wide alarm blared, cutting him off. The lights in his quarters dimmed, replaced by flashing red strobes. A voice crackled over the intercom, speaking in Dravathian. What's it saying? Eric asked. The Crithar have boarded us, Jaivon replied grimly. They are making their move. Eric and Jaivon raced toward the command center, Mittens tucked securely in Eric's arms. Soldiers hurried past them in both directions, their weapons drawn and their armor clanking as they prepared for combat. Eric, still processing the sheer absurdity of the situation, muttered to himself. This has to be the weirdest hostage situation in galactic history. Who invades a ship for a cat? The command center was a hive of activity when they arrived. General Forex stood at the center of the room, barking orders as holographic displays tracked the intruder's progress through the ship. The Crithar, with their chidnous exoskeletons and multi-limbed bodies, moved with unsettling precision, cutting through Dravathian defenses like a scalpel. They are heading for your quarters, Forex growled as Eric entered. Their objective is clear. Yeah, I figured that out, Eric said, setting Mittens down on a nearby console. She immediately began kneading the surface with her paws, oblivious to the chaos around her. Forex glanced at the cat, his spines quivering. You must secure the beast. She's already secure, Eric said, exasperated. Look at her. Does she look like she's planning to go anywhere? Forex didn't answer, his attention snapping back to the tactical displays. The criar were closing in. Suddenly the lights flickered and a new alert sounded. The criar had disabled the containment protocols for the ship's auxiliary holding bay, a storage area filled with experimental materials and hazardous alien specimens. This is a disaster, Jivon muttered, his mandibles clicking nervously. If they release those specimens, it will compromise the entire ship. Eric looked from the displays to Mittens, who had settled into her favorite loaf position, her tail flicking lazily. A wild idea began to take shape in his mind. Forex, Eric said, turning to the general, what's the most secure area on this ship? Forex frowned. The primary reactor chamber, but no one would dare. Perfect, Eric interrupted. He scooped up Mittens and headed for the exit. Get me a secure comm link to the criar leader. I've got a plan. Minutes later, Eric stood in the reactor chamber, surrounded by towering machinery that pulsed with barely contained energy. Mittens perched on his shoulder, her tail curling around his neck. A holographic projection of the criar leader flickered to life in front of him. The alien's mandibles clicked as it regarded him. Human. Surrender the beast, and we will spare your vessel. Eric smirked. Yeah, see, that's not going to work for me, but I'll make you a counteroffer. You leave now, and I won't let Mittens loose in your direction. The criar leader recoiled slightly. You dare threaten us with such a creature? Eric leaned closer to the projection, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You saw what she did to your first team, didn't you? Trust me, she's only gotten hungrier since then. Mittens, as if on cue, let out a soft, high-pitched meow. The criar leader hesitated, its confidence wavering. You bluff. That creature. Eric interrupted, raising his voice. She took down an experimental Zelvan predator without lifting a paw. She has the Dravathians wrapped around her claws. Do you really want to find out what she's capable of when she's cornered? Mittens, now bored of the theatrics, hopped down from his shoulder and began grooming herself. The criar leader's compound eyes widened. We will withdraw, it said finally. But know this, human, you have made a powerful enemy this day. Yeah, Eric replied. Doors that way. The transmission cut off, and moments later, the alarm ceased. The criar ship had disengaged. Forex and Jivon arrived moments later, their expressions a mix of confusion and admiration. You convinced them to retreat, Jivon asked. Eric shrugged. Turns out the galaxy's full of cowards when it comes to cats. Mittens meowed again, stretching languidly before curling up at Eric's feet. General Forex crossed his arms, shaking his head in disbelief. Your methods are unorthodox, human, he said, but effective. Eric laughed, scooping up Mittens. That's one way to put it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think this little terror has earned a snack. The Dravathians watched him leave, the human and his beast an enigma that would puzzle them for years to come. Eric's hope for some well-deserved peace was short-lived. The incident with the criar had only cemented Mittens' reputation as a cosmic force to be reckoned with. Word of her supposed dominance spread across the galactic communication networks faster than Eric could say, she's just a cat. Before long, the Dravathians informed him that representatives from several powerful factions were requesting no, demanding to meet him and his beast. You're kidding, Eric groaned, slumping into his chair as Jivon delivered the news. Mittens, perched on the back of the chair, batted lazily at his hair. I am not, Jivon replied solemnly. The Yeleth High Matron has requested an audience, as has the Grand War Master of the Shorak Horde. Even the Tithari Swarm Queen has expressed interest. Eric blinked. The Swarm Queen? Doesn't she command like trillions of drone warriors? Indeed, Jaivon said, nodding. It seems your beast's reputation has reached even the most distant colonies. Eric buried his face in his hands. You people are going to get me killed. Jaivon hesitated before responding. The High Conclave believes that showcasing Mitten's capabilities could strengthen alliances and deter future hostilities. Strengthen alliances? She's not some galactic superweapon. She's a cat. Eric gestured wildly at Mittens, who responded by licking her paw with deliberate indifference. Jaivon folded his hands, his expression carefully neutral. Perhaps not to you, but to others, she represents a power they cannot comprehend. She represents naps and tuna, Eric muttered. Nevertheless, the decision was made. The Vorhax's dominance altered course, setting a trajectory for a neutral starbase where the galactic summit would take place. The starbase, a sprawling structure orbiting a binary star system, was packed with representatives from dozens of species by the time Eric and Mittens arrived. The docking bay was a chaotic mess of ships, ranging from sleek Tetheri biovessels to hulking Shorak dreadnoughts. Eric stepped off the transport, clutching Mittens tightly to his chest, as a delegation of Dravathians led him toward the central atrium. The atrium was a spectacle of galactic politics. Ornate banners and alien scripts adorned the walls, and the air buzzed with translators parsing conversations into a dozen languages. At the center of the chaos was a raised platform surrounded by dignitaries. Eric was ushered forward, feeling like a gladiator about to face a bloodthirsty crowd. Mittens, true to form, yawned loudly. The Yelleth High Matron, a towering, feathered being with luminous eyes, was the first to address him. Her voice was musical but tinged with skepticism. Human, she said, we have heard much of your beast. Is it true that it subdued the Selvan predator with but a glance? Eric hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Well, not exactly a glance. It was more of a meow. The dignitaries leaned in, murmuring amongst themselves. Show us the Grand Warmaster of the Shorak Horde demanded. He was a brutish figure with a carapace like volcanic rock and eyes that burned like molten lava. We must see the power of this beast for ourselves. Yeah, about that, Eric began, but his protest was drowned out as a heavily reinforced cage was wheeled into the chamber. Inside was a creature that made the Zelvan predator look like a lapdog, a massive, multi-limbed monstrosity with razor-sharp mandibles and eyes that glowed with a malevolent light. It snarled, rattling the bars of its enclosure. Eric froze. You're kidding, right? Jaivon, standing nearby, whispered. They believe this will demonstrate Mitten's capabilities beyond doubt. This will demonstrate my capabilities as a chew toy, Eric hissed. The cage was opened, and the alien beast stepped forward, its claws clicking ominously on the floor. The dignitaries watched in breathless anticipation as Mittens blinked slowly, seemingly unimpressed. The creature growled, lowering itself into a predatory stance. Eric braced for chaos. Then Mittens made her move. With deliberate grace, she hopped down from Eric's arms and padded toward the creature. The tension in the room was palpable as she stopped a few feet away and sat, tail curling around her paws. The alien beast tilted its head, confused. Mittens tilted hers in response. And then, with the utter confidence only a cat could muster, she began grooming herself. The alien beast froze, its growl fading. It sniffed the air, then backed away, whimpering. Within moments, it had retreated to the corner of the room, cowering. The atrium erupted into chaos. Remarkable, the Yelleth High Matron exclaimed. The beast's dominance is absolute, the Tethari Swarm Queen declared, her voice like the rustling of leaves. Eric, meanwhile, could only stare in disbelief as Mittens sauntered back to him, her tail held high. He scooped her up, muttering under his breath. What is wrong with you? Mittens purred. The summit ended with an unprecedented agreement between the factions. Treaties were signed, alliances forged, and hostilities quelled, all in the shadow of Mittens' supposed supremacy. As the Vorhax's dominance departed the starbase, Jaivon approached Eric one final time. You have done more for intergalactic peace than any diplomat in history, the ambassador said. Your methods, though unconventional, are unparalleled. Eric rolled his eyes. Yeah, sure. Let's pretend any of this was intentional. Shyvon hesitated. Will you share your techniques with us, so that we may better understand the bond between human and beast? Eric chuckled, scratching Mittens under the chin. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. As the ship sailed through the stars, Eric reclined in his chair, Mittens curled up on his lap. Despite the absurdity of the past weeks, he found himself smiling. In the end, Mittens hadn't just tamed a galaxy of skeptics, she'd reminded them all of something important sometimes. The most extraordinary things are hiding in plain sight.